hype about living the dream? It's time for truth. This is the place for tools, power, and real talk so you can create the life you dream and deserve. Your ultimate life. Subscribe, share, create. You have infinite power.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Your Ultimate Life, the podcast that's dedicated to one thing, and that's to help you create a life that you love, a life of purpose, prosperity, and joy by serving with the gifts and life experience that you have. Today, I'm grateful to have Trish Wilkinson as a guest. Welcome to the show, Trish.
Hi, I'm excited to be here. I love this podcast. I mean, I've listened to a whole bunch of episodes and I thought, I get to be a guest on this podcast. I feel very grateful and privileged.
Well, I'm grateful and privileged to have you here. One of the things that I think is, we were just talking beforehand about the journey each person has. And some people are overcome by their journeys and they're destroyed. And others, things happen to them, and instead of ruining them, they let those things refine them. And how we got where we are to having a passion and a story, and I know your passion we'll explore as we go along, is really the blessing that we have to offer others. How Absolutely. We got there, because people see us at the top of something and they think, ooh, that's cool, but I could never do that. And they don't know how you got there. And that sharing of that is so powerful. And it's literally the power that we have. Anyway, so the first question I want to ask you as we start is, I don't want you to be bashful at all. I want you to be open and effusive, as it were. And I want you to tell us how Trish is adding good to the world.
Well, so I'm on a mission, actually, Kellan.
I want to hear all about it.
So I'm on a mission to restore joy in education and improve kids' learning, because we being the United States, just got another set of scores out, the scores that they take, the standardized tests, and they're the lowest in math and reading ever. And we've been really struggling. So, and some schools, it depends on the school and the area and all of those things. But some schools some are doing better than others. But right now, overall, as a country, we're really struggling. We were struggling before COVID, then COVID hit, and now it's worse than ever. Even though we're working on things like social and emotional learning and trying to understand where kids are and helping them develop the social skills and manage their emotions and develop empathy and all those kinds of things. But teachers don't have time for a whole new curriculum. They already didn't have time in their schedules to do all the other things that they're asked to do by administrators. So I
want to ask you something. I want you to keep going. Just put a comma right there. Okay. How do we compare? You said it's the lowest it's been in forever. How do we compare with other countries? European countries or Scandinavian countries? How do we compare with those in those same? Are the scores such that they're comparable? How do we tell?
So we're not taking the same tests all over the world. So we can kind of, look at their scores and what's on their test versus our scores and what's on our tests. It's not exactly comparing apples and oranges. I mean, it's kind of comparing apples and oranges, but at least it's all fruit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And that's a good way to say it.
So, and we are not in our country, not doing as well as, places in Europe and various other places.
So I thought that, and I want you, I'm going on a thread here and I want you to come with me. And that is, I thought I made that up. I didn't know that. I thought that might be true. And you said, they're trying to have all these curriculums of emotional wellness and these skills and that skills. Do those schools in Europe that we're comparing to, do they teach all that stuff?
So they teach a certain amount of it. They call it social hygiene or social and emotional hygiene, something like that.
Yeah.
And my daughter taught English in Cali, Colombia for 6 months. And when she was in the schools there, they actually have a curriculum that they work on social and emotional hygiene. So they're doing that in other countries, but I feel like in our country, we've gotten so into, off on tangents as to, who's what gender and how people identify and all kinds of other things. And the bottom line is we just want people to be empathetic and care about other people. So
that was my question. That was my thread. The thread was, we're not doing so well in the world. I realize there's some apples and oranges. They do some of what we do, but not enough. We've got a bunch of tangents that it seems like we're going on. And so my fundamental question that made me wander down that thread is, if we suck, why do we suck? I mean, we have technology, we have wealth, we have all this. Why are we struggling? And I realize that teachers are overwhelmed, and you're going to talk more about that later in terms of implementing what you want to help them understand. But why are we struggling so much?
To me, so here's a little anecdotal experience. Okay. So I approached a school district and said, look, I have these 5 brain-friendly practices that we could do in the classroom that we could do exactly what I'm talking about. Create the environment for social and emotional learning. Kids, restore joy in education for both kids and teachers, because they know the kids are stressed out, the teachers are stressed out. And we've had these studies, because all the 5 practices are science-based. And the reason I just discovered them is because I was teaching at the same school where my children were going to school in elementary school. And my kids, my own children, I felt like they were failing. I had one kid who was super anxious all the time. She wet her pants a lot. We had to have, into 2nd and 3rd grade, we had to just bring extra clothes to school for her because she just was having such a hard time functioning. And then my other daughter had attention issues and auditory processing issues. And, so here I'm supposed to be an expert with kids and my own are just not doing so well. So I thought I have to figure this out. So I talked to their pediatrician first. I read all these books and articles and studies, and, I talked to a neurologist and psychologists, and you get the idea. I just went on this quest. I was like, I got to help these kids. These are my own kids. And my husband was like, okay, you're doing all this stuff for everybody else's kids, but ours are really struggling and you're the expert. I don't really know what to do. And I was just like, I'm having a hard time figuring that out myself. So basically, I did a lot of these things with my own children, and it worked really well. Our younger daughter stopped wetting her pants. She developed confidence. She actually graduated valedictorian in her high school in an international baccalaureate program.
Wow.
And the other daughter ended up doing way better, and she's a very successful software engineer now, which if you'd have told me my kids would be so successful, I would have laughed. I would have said, well, I hope you're right, because that's not how things were going at the time. So when we were talking earlier and you were saying, your own story, there's a reason that we get to where we are. But the thing that happened after that is I was like, if this stuff works so well for my own children, maybe it'll work in my classroom. And so I just plugged in these 5 brain-friendly practices into my classroom, and just amazing things happen.
So I started with the question, how are you adding good to the world? And you started telling me about these practices. And then I took us off on a tangent about how come our school system's in so much trouble. And
I think we're asking teachers to do so many things. And there's been so much technology that's been taking the place of human communication. And and a lot of this technology in the last, couple of generations, it's still fairly new, even though it's so much a part of our lives. Like, look how we're talking now.
Right.
And even having a meeting and looking at each other. I mean, on the podcast, they don't see that. But the point is we have this technology now where we can do all kinds of things that we weren't able to do before. But now society is adjusting. How do we engage kids? Like, people are always saying things about Gen Zers, Generation Z, how they don't have an attention span, and they, just all these disparaging things. They don't. Anyway, the point is, Gen Zers just don't have the patience to do things that, in their opinion, don't have a purpose. If they don't have a why, if they don't have a reason for doing. So one of the practices is to help kids, tell them what they're going to learn, put it into an AI, because, chat GBT or, whatever you're using, and say, how can an 8-year-old child use elapsed time in their life, if that's a math concept? Or how can a 15-year-old use this geometric concept in their life? And it'll spit out all of this stuff. And the kids look at it and go, oh my gosh, I can use this in all these ways. And then we say, yeah, pick a couple of them and, that resonate with you. Start asking questions in your mind, like, what would this look like if I was doing this in my life? And be thinking about that as you're learning this material. It just turns it all upside down. I mean, the teachers who are doing this, and for me, myself, I used to feel like Sisyphus, rolling the rock up the hill, trying to get the kids engaged. And then the next thing I knew, it was rolling back on top of my head. Right? They're all staring out the window. And so, so you've got this, helping them define a purpose for what they're learning and how they're going to use it. I just don't even have to think about engagement anymore. They're engaged because they have a reason. They know the why. We're not teaching things out of context anymore because they have a purpose for learning it. And then,
so there's a couple of really good things I'm sticking in here. There's a couple of really good things. One is the shift to the context, meaning you're saying that at least that group must have a reason, or they don't have patience for it. And that probably comes to some degree from the immediacy of technology and everything else. And that's a very interesting thing. And then the outcome of that is, as soon as they have it, then the engagement happens of itself. So I want you to tell us the 5 brain-friendly practices. Tell me what they are. That changes the world, changes the game in the classroom. What are they?
So the first one is, we give kids if they're elementary school, we can give them 10 minutes of exercise and it'll last them all day. We used to walk to school or ride our bikes or whatever. Now we drop the kids off, they take the bus, right? So basically they're coming to school and their brains are asleep. But you can't do that in middle school or high school. You only have the kids for like 50 minutes unless you're doing block scheduling. So I have them do it for like 90 seconds. If they want to spend a little longer, then they can, but even 90 seconds of exercise. And I have all kinds of fun little things that they can do with kids, all kinds of movement that they can do with kids to just raise their heartbeat enough so that the oxygen gets to their brain, all the chemicals start moving the way they're supposed to in their brain. Their neurons start firing.
Neurons, right. There we go.
Yeah, the neurons, so that their neural pathways are all firing. So it gets their brains in gear. And think about it. And usually the movement is a little bit silly. So in the beginning, they're like, I'm not going to do this. And then everyone else is doing it. And so they start doing it. And there's this mirror neuron thing that happens. So the teacher is doing it. So they're doing it. And a lot of it has to do with the teachers. Well, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that, a teacher told me. And I said, so do you want your kids engaged? I mean, I get that it's uncomfortable, but, doing something that might make you a little uncomfortable, or think of things that you'll feel more comfortable doing. If you don't like that idea for doing that particular physical exercise, let's think of some things that'll work for you, that you'll feel comfortable doing.
Wake up the body,
right.
And whether it's 10 minutes or 90 seconds, depends on context and who you're doing and everything, but wake up and get stuff moving. All right, what's number 2?
Number 2 is water. So our brains are 73% water, and most kids come to school of all ages dehydrated. So one of the reasons we eat breakfast and the things kids eat for breakfast, sometimes they come, without any food in their bellies. Sometimes they've just had an energy drink. They need water. There is no substitute for water. So I have them all bring their own personalized water bottle with their name on it to school, and they get a couple of swigs of water before they start, because a lot of times when kids complain about headaches or they're tired or they have a stomach ache or any of those things, a lot of them are just signs of dehydration. And if we can just give kids, not so much that they're running to the bathroom every 5 minutes, because I made that mistake when I first started doing this.
I was going to say, I imagine you did, yeah.
Yeah, so I started it with fourth grade, and they were so excited about being able to have a water bottle and drinking it all the time. They were just running but we worked that out within the first week. I said, okay, we got to modify this, and I had the kids help me. So what does that look like? So now it's just, okay, everybody take a couple of swigs of water, not too much. You know what we're talking about here. So they just take a couple of swigs of water, and I can't even tell you the difference just a little bit of water makes. It's crazy.
Wow.
But it's how our brains work.
Yeah,
we need
73%.
Water.
Yeah, I didn't know that. So, all right, 1, 2, move, wake up, have a little water, keep your brain, hydrated. And what's number 3?
Number 3 is we play a little brain game, because we never know how kids come into the classroom. And the cool thing about the brain games is that, like, for example, one of the things I love to do is play with them add a move. And we also do like add a sound. I make a move, then we make the same move, and a kid makes another move. Then we make another move, and we keep adding moves, because one of the things that does is it improves working memory, which is executive brain function, right? Yeah. But the other thing it does is if a kid just had somebody say something mean to them in the hallway, or they got in trouble that morning, or they had a fight with their big sister, or whatever the case may be, they come in from all kinds of different situations. And what happens is when they're focused on a little game like that, and all these little games are funny, so it just allows them to relax. It takes at least 90 seconds to work through the cortisol, the stress hormone in your brain, and replace it with dopamine and other happy hormones. Mm-hmm. And so we just play a 90-second brain game. And then we take 3 deep breaths, because those deep breaths are a trigger, because after you've been doing this for a while, then they know, oh, we're getting into learning. So what we've done, and I call these first 3 practices, we prepare kids' brains for learning. So elementary school, they'll do it. If they do 10 minutes of exercise, it's 14 minutes. If they do it in middle or high school, it's 4 minutes, because they're only doing 90 seconds of exercise. And then they're taking a swig of water, and they're doing 90 seconds of a brain game, and then the deep breaths. So it's super practical. And that 4 minutes saves so much time, because their brains are ready to go.
I believe you. People talk about that, and you and I have talked before, or at least I've talked about it in places where you've been, about morning rituals and how we prepare ourselves for the day. And mine's long, it's 2.5 hours. And people say, I don't have that kind of time. And the answer is, creates 5 hours for my day. So
exactly,
whatever. So I love this. Keep going. What's number 4? So you've prepared my brain for learning. Then what?
So it's prepare, purpose, process. So the next thing we do is we give the beginning of the week, we give kids a purpose for what they're going to be learning. So if middle school or high school, they know basically what they're going to be covering in that subject. So if they're teaching a concept in math, or they're teaching about a period in social studies, or if they're reading something, you get the idea. Elementary school, they learn to do it, much quicker, because they're teaching a lot of subjects. So they do this several times, maybe on a Monday, but then they don't do it again until Friday. And what happens when we give kids a purpose for their learning, so when I was doing it, when I first started doing this, we didn't have any AI. So we had to I had to look things up ahead of time. I would ask the kids what they thought. We'd brainstorm. It took way longer. But now it takes like 5 minutes, because now we just use like ChatGPT or one of the other AIs, and we say, how can an 8-year-old third grader or 8 or 9-year-old third grader use this particular math concept in their life? Or we're reading this story because ChatGPT has everything, right? So we're reading this story, and it has these themes. And a lot of times, ChatGPT will know, they'll even be familiar with the story. How can an 8-year-old student, a 6-year-old student, a 12-year-old student, however old the kid is, use the concepts in this story in their lives? And it'll just spit out 10 ways.
It does that, and I love that. I use that too. I'm not going to describe it because it'll just take too long, but I do. So number 5. So you gave him a purpose. You prepared the brain. You gave him a purpose.
I want to say one more thing about purpose, because this is really important.
All right.
They have to look at the list and they have to choose what resonates with them. We can't say, see all these great things it does for you. We need to take the extra 2 minutes to say, let's go over the list and you write down in your journal what resonates with you, what is important to you. How do you think you might use this in your life? And know that throughout the week, you may spark something else and think, oh, now this is my purpose. Your purpose might change. But what's really important for you to do is know what we're going to be learning and then have a reason to learn it. You have your why. That's your purpose. Because think about how much better our lives are when we have purpose, no matter what we're doing. So I wanted to say that before we moved on, because this is a really important step.
Yeah, it is. Thank you. So number 5.
Number 5 is process. So at the end of the week, we talk about, it's thinking about thinking.
Right.
At the end of the week, we allow their brains an opportunity to process what they learned. And I just would set the timer and they would write in their journal, okay, for this story that we've learned, what have you learned and how do you think you can use those concepts in your life? Here's the timer. I'm setting it for 5 minutes, ready, go. And they write for 5 minutes. And you have to modify it for different age groups. And, I get all that, but for the sake of the podcast. So they write in a journal and then the timer goes off. And then they get a partner. And I would encourage them to get different partners each time. And so they're sharing what they learned and how they're going to use it. And I would hear in the classroom at first, in the beginning, I would hear, oh my gosh, I didn't even think of that. I'm going to put that in my journal. And then another kid would say, hey, you can't use that. That was my idea. And I'd say, wait, so you don't want to be a leader? And they'd say, what do you mean? And I'd say, that's literally what being a leader is. Somebody sees what you're doing and they see something and they go, wow, that's awesome. I want to do that too. That's exactly what being a leader is. And they're like, oh, yeah, okay, you can put that in your journal. And I say, I would encourage all of you that if you hear something that you didn't think of to put in your journal, definitely add it, because our world, would you agree that our world needs some good leaders? And they're like, oh, yeah. And I'd say, okay, well, so let's have everyone in this classroom be a good leader, come up with good ideas that people want to follow, that people can hang on to, that you can contribute to other people. So then they start doing this. So those are the 5 practices. And here's the magic. You ready?
Yes. Give me the magic.
So when they've been doing this for a few weeks, like the 3rd or 4th week, I have the teachers. And what I did is start handing it off to the kids. So in the beginning, does it take a little longer because you're planning it? It's something new. Yeah. But then you start handing it off to the kids. So it's a student who leads the physical exercise. And it's a student who leads, reminding everybody to get a drink of water. They lead the brain game. They lead coming up with a purpose. They put the information into an AI, and they come up, they have it come up on the screen, because they have these big screens in the classrooms now, and they come up on the big screen. It all, spits it out and they can read it all. And they're the ones that are running that. And then it's a student that runs the process. Okay, everybody, we're going to process what we learned about this and this subject, whatever they're doing this week. So everybody get out your journals. They lead it. And we let them know, guys, we really need your support. And you start with your gregarious, really outgoing kids. And you say, make sure you're really kind to the people who are up here leading it, because everyone in here gets a turn to do every one of these practices. And then I would have kids design a chart for who gets to do it, what date, and when they're going to do it. And if somebody's anxious about it, they can work with each other on being anxious. How can you feel about it? And we work on, like, that's one of the things about the breathing, the brain games, that kind of stuff. So it's all the social and emotional learning is embedded with the academic learning.
Well, certainly, because they're leading it. So that's fabulous. So I'm really excited to share that.
That's when the magic happens, because
I just can see that.
At first, they can tease each other a little, and I'll say, okay, you got to know what comes around goes around. You're going to have a turn to do this. Do you want people to get, and they're like, oh, never mind. Good job.
Right. Right.
Right. And the other thing is, then the gregarious kids have been up, a real shy kid comes up, they're nervous as heck. They come up and the kids go, I know, I was nervous too. You can totally do this. So it becomes this very supportive, amazing environment. And the first year I did this, I did it with a really rough class that I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how I'm going to get through this school year.
Oh, wow.
I don't know how I'm going to get through this week, much less a school year. And it ended up, we ended up getting the highest scores in the school for our grade level. And the following year, when I did this in 6th grade, we got the highest scores in the district. And it wasn't me that I'm so amazing. That's why I'm teaching other people to do it.
So thank you. I know it took some minutes to do all that. I'm really grateful, because what occurs to me is, yeah, you're putting that in as a practice for school, but it's also a practice for anyone and everyone, because our brain's still a brain, processing, still processing, having a purpose is still having a purpose. So I want
exactly.
So I want to know how you told me a little bit, like you had your own kids and they were having trouble and you figured this stuff out so that it would work for them, and then for your own class, and that worked. What is it? I mean, now your kids are grown up and they're all successful and you win. So what is it that's in Trish's heart that makes her now an evangelist that is committed to helping other people learn this? Like, why is that so important in your heart?
Because I see so many people suffering. We are losing so many teachers who are just exhausted and overwhelmed and feeling like I can't get these kids engaged. And kids are so anxious. And the thing is these are such simple processes. Like, we look at these problems that we're having in education, not just here in the United States. It's happening all over the place, because I do a lot of international stuff. So It's not just the United States, it's happening everywhere. And we look at this as like almost like it's an insurmountable problem, and it's not. And it's actually, and are these 5 practices the only things that we need to do? Well, maybe not the only things, but if everybody's doing these 5 practices, oh my gosh, what a difference it would make. And then there are other things to add to it. So my passion is, we don't need to be in the state we're in this country, in this world, as far as education. People can learn to be problem solvers again. People can learn to instead of living out of fear, we hear about the pulls between love and fear, right?
Yeah.
And we can operate a lot more out of love if we take a lot of the fear away. And these practices, that's what it helps them do. It helps the kids build self-confidence. They start working together and becoming a community. It's what's burning in my heart is I feel like this is a problem that we can solve. We can improve communication, and we can improve education all over the planet. And we can use the technology in a positive way that, instead of separating us, it can bring us together,
So
just like using it for purpose.
Yeah. And so I know that you have been on a mission to get it in school districts, and you've told me before that teachers are overwhelmed and they have too many things and they can't do it. So tell me a little bit about your journey, where you are now in terms of initial places, in terms of some beta testing, to get some kind of rollout. Like what kind of things are happening, and does any of the recent political changes matter to you, or is that indifferent? What's been your journey to get this in? And I know there's been a lot of frustration, but talk a little bit about that, because here's why I want that. I don't want the story of woe, although it might sound like that sometimes. I want to highlight your own personal determination and commitment to make this happen, because the idea of creating your ultimate life of purpose, prosperity, and joy is founded on a willingness to persevere and to do hard stuff and to keep going, because nobody ever fell up the mountain. So tell me a little bit about that journey.
Because no one ever fell up the mountain. Yeah, that gravity thing just really gets in the way.
Yeah, it does.
Well, I'm in the process of that right now, truthfully. I'm doing the second cohort with a handful of teachers, and I'm actually working with homeschooling parents as well, because homeschooling parents are having trouble with education, keeping their kids engaged, just like everyone else. So I really am looking at, however kids are getting educated, I don't have any, some people are against charter schools. Some people are against, there are all these opinions about all these things. For me, I just want teachers, educators, whether they're parents or, teachers at a charter, I've worked with teachers at charter schools, private schools, public schools, wherever, all age groups now, elementary, middle school, and high school. And we've had to modify the practices somewhat for age groups, but it's pretty universal that, wow, you're right. This really works. What's really been difficult for me is teachers are so overwhelmed. They're just like, I can't do one more thing. And I just say to them, oh my gosh, this will save you so much time and you'll feel so much better. But they feel like they're just maxed out, that they don't have any more to give. And they feel like learning something new would be one more thing. So and I will tell you, I've almost quit this lots of times. And every time something else will happen, I'll go, and it's like the universe is laughing at me going, you're not getting out of this. So, because it is really hard. And I feel like I've done all this work. I've made very little money doing it. But it's a labor of love for me. So, I really want to see education improved. I want teachers to go back to where I started. When I first started teaching, I was like, oh my gosh, they're paying me for this. This is so much fun. And I felt like that in the beginning because I'd bring in my guitar and my rhythm instruments. I taught a bunch of stuff with, music, and, I'd make up songs. They'd make up songs. So my little kids, when I taught first grade, it was a great way for them to learn to read. It was a great way for my second language students who are learning English to learn English. And I love music. So I was just like, I can't believe they're paying me for this. But then I too was just like, they pile more and more and more on that teachers have to do it. It's exhausting. And I thought, I don't know. And then it came to a head when I had this really difficult fourth grade class. And I thought, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then I started plugging these things in and went, holy mackerel, this is ridiculous. So, my passion in doing all this is that I know it's surmountable. I know that it can work, but it is hard. I'm in my second cohort and I only have a handful of teachers that I'm working with right now. And I really am looking for a school. I feel like once I get a school, I talk to the administrator, I talk to the teachers, tell them what's expected in the fall, and really get them going and excited about it and show them that it's a lot easier than they think it would be and that it's going to take them less time, not more. And then they get to enjoy their jobs again and they increase their scores and, just all of that. Because I feel like the community of a whole school doing this stuff together would also create just amazing miracles rather than just having teachers here and there. But I haven't been able to find that yet. I'm looking.
Yeah, I want to know, people that are listening. I want two things from you now, and that is where where can someone go right now to, whether they're a homeschooling parent listening to this or a person that's affiliated with education in some way, where can they go to read more about this? Your website or some explanation of this? Do you have a place where they can go and take a look and learn a little bit?
Yes. So they can go to thebrainstages.com and go to the Empowered School tab. It's called the Empowered School Project.
Okay, that is thebrainstages.com and the Empowered School Project. And, I've had the privilege of having conversations with you about this and hearing some of this, although I'd never heard you describe the 5 things like you did this time. And I'm excited for it too. And I have this sort of foreboding sense about, this thing we call education that isn't very functional now. And I'm not even involved in it, but I just have this feeling, and I love the idea of returning some joy and some fun. And my sister taught second grade for 20 years before she went back and got her PhD and then ended up teaching at university. But, she did a lot of things in music and stuff, but that was years ago. And it doesn't feel like that kind of stuff, that spontaneity or anything gets to happen anymore. Am I nuts, or is that real?
I think it depends on the teacher. I know teachers like even this is a story. So at one point I had to, our school district said that teachers had to write the standards on the board for what they were teaching that day. And, I always had pretty good scores. And a lot of it was because I taught with other modalities like art and music and whatever. Mm-hmm. But so the principal would do a walkthrough and he'd say, I don't see your standards on the board. And I'd say, so what do you want me to cut out? Like, I help with the running club. Okay. I listed all the things I do in the school.
Yeah.
And I said, so what would you like me to do to cut out so that I can take the time to make sure that I get the standards up there for what I'm teaching? Because I already do this purpose thing that has meaning for the kids much more than the standard, the jargon basically that the standards use.
Right. So what was the answer?
And he said, actually, I would like you to keep doing what you're doing. I said, and you know what, just look at my scores at the end of the year. And if you're not happy, then we can have another discussion. I don't want to be insubordinate or difficult in any way, but I can't take any more time from my family. There has to be a boundary there. So he said, well, okay, we'll see what happens. And by mid-year, he was having all these people marching through my classroom to see what I was doing because I was doing the practices, right? And so they would watch what I was doing, different people from different, newer teachers from different schools, administrators.
I love it. So I want to ask you one final thing, 2 final things actually. One is I understand the brain stages and empowered schools. Great. If someone wants to find out more about, I've heard your journey now, and we talked in the beginning about how you got where you are is the most important thing, and I'm fascinated. And so you said, well, gee, I don't have much of a story. And I would just flat out disagree. So if somebody wants to know a little bit more about you, is there any place that's available, or are you only the school lady? Like, how can we find out more about how you got where you are?
I'm not sure. I mean, I haven't written a book on that. I mean, I wrote Brain Stages, How to Raise Smart, Confident Kids and Have Fun Doing It. And in there are quote unquote real deal stories that talk about several experiences we have with our own kids. Say the name of that book
again slower, because I want everybody to be able to hear that.
Oh, okay. It's called Brain Stages, How to Raise Smart, Confident Kids and Have Fun Doing It. I believe raising kids and educating kids should be fun. So it's basically, this is kind of where your child's brain development is at this age, although all kids are different, obviously. And this is kind of where they are socially at this age. And this is what they're supposed to learn in this grade, kindergarten through 5. It's kindergarten through 5th grade. And here are a whole bunch of fun games to play to make sure they get their needs met, no matter what's going on at school. And a lot of teachers actually use that book because it has, if they have kids who are having trouble learning something or they just want to change it up a little bit or whatever, and they're teaching a certain concept, then they'll play the games that are in the book because they don't require a lot of equipment or any of that kind of stuff. And it's just fun. There's nutrition stuff. So if they want to find out about me, there are several quote unquote real deal stories in there. And then there's more information like about me stuff on my website.
All right, good. Well. Thank you. So the last question is, what didn't I ask you that you want people to know?
I'm not exactly sure how to answer that. What didn't you ask? I don't know, because I feel like the most important message that I want people to get from this is if you are feeling upset about what's going on in our world right now, I want you to know that we have the tools, the technology, the research, all that stuff. We have everything we need to recreate what's going on in our world. So, and like you said, like the 5 practices, I've had dads come up to me after parent presentations, because I don't just do this for schools, I also do it for parents. And he said, I have my own business and I did this stuff with my staff. Oh my gosh, I can't believe the difference. He said, I can sure see how this works for kids.
I can totally get on board with that. So I want to thank you, Trish, for being here with us today, for being open and fun and making this a joyful and educating experience for me and for everybody. Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me. This is my passion, so I love to talk about it.
I want to encourage all of you to listen again, whether you're a kid, whether you're an adult, and to think about these. Preparation is so important. Understanding your purpose and processing what you have learned, no matter what it's from a difficult experience or from anything, is so powerful and is right in line with everything that we talk about here to create your ultimate life.
Never hold back and you'll never ask why. Open your heart and this time around.
Right here, right now. Your opportunity for massive growth is right in front of you. Every episode gives you practical tips and practices that will change everything. If you want to know more, go to KellanFluckigerMedia.com. If you want more free tools, go here, YourUltimateLife.ca. Subscribe. Share.
Stand with your heart in the sky and your feet on the ground.